Give me a little test.
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 Let's go.
Let's go. Welcome to Backseat Directing,
where we talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
We're your hosts,
Andrew
and Arron.
And today we are talking about The Woman King.
Alright, Andrew. This weekend, The Woman King came out, and we went and saw it. We saw it on Saturday. What'd you think of it?
I thought that this movie was really good. So we are going to have a whole lot on our plate to discuss. But my general thoughts on the movie was that it was an incredible film. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. We'll definitely get into why. But I'm glad to have contributed to its opening weekend box office numbers by showing up and buying my ticket. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought overall it was good. It was more emotional than I thought it was going to be. I was thinking it was more of like an action kind of movie, which there's action portions in it, of course. But it was definitely more of a story-driven movie. And I thought they did a good job of telling that story that they were going for. I would like to say that this episode, we're going to start off with no spoilers. And then kind of halfway through, we'll shift and go into spoilers, but we'll let you know when we switch over.
Yeah, we're going to have to remember to give you guys that break. So that anybody who wants to just get a feel for what the movie's about, who's in the movie, what kind of went into it, and what the public perception and ratings are, you'll have plenty of time to hear those thoughts. And then from there on, we'll delve into specifics about the movie, our thoughts on specific scenes, maybe the ending of the movie. But we'll give you guys plenty of time to listen and get some information before we get there.
Yeah. So this movie came out just this last weekend, and it is pretty well received so far. On IMDb, it's rated a 5.9 out of 10, and then on Rotten Tomatoes, for the critic score, it's a 94%, and then the audience score is a 99% on Rotten Tomatoes.
So I want to cut in just to say that this is a pretty big disparity between IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, not altogether unheard of, but I think in the case for this movie, the specific reason why is I've seen a little bit of what could be construed as controversy around this movie in the IMDb reviews, and I went into reading some of them. So from what I understand, this movie is an example of alternate history, is what the IMDb description says. So I want to say that Arron and myself went into this movie watching it with no historical knowledge of the actual events of the Oyo tribe or of the Dahomey Empire. So we're not historians, so we did not know that. We respect the real history. With that being said, it didn't affect our opinion of the movie when we were watching it because we didn't know the real history. So we're here just to talk about the movie, the fictional movie that is an alternate history, and whether we like the movie or not, like I said, we respect the history, and I don't want anything to cover that up. But this movie is just a film, just a fictional story, and we're just here to talk about that aspect of it. So
yeah, it's based on true events, or inspired by true events.
I see it more,
directly taken from the textbook and putting into a movie.
I see it as the Dora Milaje. I can see being from Black Panther. I can see being inspired by this group of female warriors, kind of like similar to the Amazons, this strong female warrior elite force. And I see it as they took that aspect of the story and just focused to drive a plot from there. And they used the real historical names of these tribes and possibly even some individuals. But I don't see that as them necessarily trying to say that this is exactly the way these things happened, especially when the summary straight off the IMDb page says that it's alternate history. So they're playing on kind of some modern sensibilities when they change this plot to make the movie more enjoyable and appropriate to modern audiences and modern experiences and modern culture. So I think that this is what it is a movie,
Yeah, and
it's not a documentary.
I enjoyed the story that they told with the characters that they used to tell the story. The budget for this movie was $50 million, And then going into the weekend, there wasn't high aspirations in terms of how much money that they were going to get. And they kind of end up overblown, or they blew the expectations, right? They got 19 million on opening weekend, which is pretty good for this type of movie.
Yeah, this type of movie, meaning a movie that is performance-based, award-driven. This is an Oscar kind of movie. So these caliber of movies don't tend to draw in as big of a financial reward as a blockbuster movie like an Avengers or Star Wars movie. So these numbers, 19 million, is a really good opening weekend. And the reports I was reading were saying that this was unexpected, pleasantly unexpected, and that the movie is doing really well and projected to make $100 million. So that's what we mean when we say this kind of movie. So it's definitely very performance driven. We'll get into some really good performances as we talk about it. But just to go over the general plot of the movie, the idea of the movie is that there is this tribe called the Dahomey tribe, or the Dahomey kingdom. It's this tribe in Africa where they have an elite force of women warriors that is called the Agogea. I hope I'm nailing that pronunciation. I tried my best. So the Agogea are this group of really strong elite women led by Naniska, who is in a lot of ways the general to the King Gezo in this story. Naniska being portrayed by Viola Davis and King Gezo being portrayed by John Boyega. And the story is that they are going up against the Oyo. The Oyo people are this other extremely powerful force, a big group in Africa that is contending with the Dahomey over different resources. And a big point of this movie is the slave trade as well. So these two tribes are competing against each other, and the story kind of unravels from there. That's a basic general plot that I'll get into without spoilers.
Yeah, and one of the things that I liked a lot about this movie was the opening scene. So again, not too many spoilers here, but the opening scene basically starts out with a fight. And this part was in the trailer, so I feel like it's okay to say how cool this part was. Is that these guys are along the campfire. It's dusk outside, so it's getting dark. And then they rise out of the grass with this mean stare, ready to kick some butt. And it kind of gives you chills as they come out of the grass, and you're like, oh yeah, they're going to wreck them.
I love the way that Naniska stands up first. First of all, establishes her as the leader, because she stands up out of the grass, not only putting herself in danger, but setting the example of just staring down the enemy there. And then everyone follows suit because they respect her, because they follow her into battle and they do as she does. And I think it sets the tone right off the bat for who she is.
Yeah, I agree. Viola Davis definitely pulled off the role of being this fierce general that fights with swords and knives in their hands, and being a brutal leader to this army that's protecting the king.
Yeah. For all I know, Viola Davis in real life is the kindest, gentlest person, but she definitely pulls off this rough, rugged exterior.
She had a sense of intensity.
Yeah. Roles like Naniska, Amanda Waller in The Suicide Squad. I really like her as Annalise Keating in How to Get Away with Murder. She just has like this strong bravado, and like you said, she pulls it off really well. But while we're talking about Viola Davis, let me mention some of the casting. So we have Viola Davis as Naniska, the general that we already mentioned. She's starring alongside Thuso Mbedu, who plays Nawe. And then we have Lashana Lynch, who is Izogi. Fans might recognize her as Monica Rambeau from Captain Marvel and from Doctor Strange 2. She's fantastic in this. Sheila Atim plays Amenza. She's kind of the confidant and right-hand woman to Naniska. And then, as mentioned, John Boyega is King Gezo, who is obviously Finn in the most recent Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah. Who is your favorite character?
Without a doubt, and Aaron already knows this, is Lashana Lynch as Izogi. Izogi is so cool, so tough. She just embodies strength and power and ferocity and no fear. She doesn't feel pain. And Lashana Lynch really brings that to the screen. and I just found her so cool and enticing. She's like quickly risen through the ranks of the action stars list in my mind. I'm sure we'll hit a ranking for action stars one day, but who is your favorite?
I would agree with her. She is a complex character too. Like, she had a lot of depth to her. Like, she wasn't just this fierce warrior, but she was also kind of had this soft side to her that you would see when she's approaching
Just be careful what you say here before we go.
When she's approaching the trainees for the Hummy.
Because we can circle back more to her delving into her character as we get into spoilers.
Yeah.
But she's really, really great. I will say that I think the standout performance of the movie to me, and she's kind of like that person you don't expect in terms of, people often talk about a side character that steals the show. To me, she's that in this movie. Whereas I see Naniska and Nawe as the main characters, I think Azogi kind of steals the spotlight a little bit with how great she is.
Yeah, her acting presence really sold the role, but then also her physical presence sold the role that she could actually be this fierce warrior that's in front of you. And something that was really cool about this movie is that all the actors did their own stunts. So they spent hours and hours in the gym getting ready for this role, but then also spent hours and hours practicing the choreography to the fights and the action scenes within the movie, which I think is super cool and very relatable to me, since I love to work out. I work out probably more than the average person.
Definitely more than the average person.
So the whole like training aspect to not only the characters within the story, but then also the actors that are portraying those characters is something that's really cool for me to watch.
Yeah, and there's been a huge trend in that in Hollywood too, obviously, with, you know, the superhero roles, people just getting bigger and bigger. And I think that pressure's been on a lot of actors. So I'm sure there's a really cool behind the scene video of all of the actresses working out together. I just saw a quick clip of it. But it seems so cool that they all got together and were working out to embody the physicality of these roles, because they know they're coming on screen as these badass women warriors. I mean, you've got to try and get the definition, the shoulders, the arms to pull that off. But
you develop a certain connection with people when you go through intense workouts together.
Certainly.
And all of this training happens obviously before and during the actual shooting process of the movie. So by the time they got to producing and shooting the movie, they all know each other on a different level than maybe other actors and casts would, because they went through all these grueling workouts together, which for anyone who's done like a group class or anything like that, or been on a sports team, kind of knows the camaraderie that goes along with putting yourself through intense physical labor and workouts. And it definitely brings you closer, and it's nice to know like someone else is suffering with you, you know, for a common goal. So they probably, and it seems like they did, kind of form this team aspect to all the casting, and then you can kind of see that relationship within the movie.
Yeah, that reminds me of a really cool story that I'll tell quickly because it's about a different movie. But in Saving Private Ryan, Spielberg had the actors go through kind of a quick boot camp where they all had to work out together and go through this harsh experience together to bond the cast going into this war movie. And then there's a character who is in communications who comes into the story from the outside of the troupe. He was excluded from the boot camp experience, so he was kind of even came onto the set as an outsider to them, to kind of help push along the feelings that the actors would be experiencing in the movie. So it's kind of this old school directing technique of kind of actually playing with people's mentality. But since you mentioned, we started this all talking about the fight scene choreography.
Yes.
That'll help me segue into our stunt/fight coordinator, who is very interesting for this movie. So the stunt fight coordinator for this movie is Daniel Hernandez. And I think that oftentimes stunt fight coordinators kind of go by the wayside in terms of recognition. So folks might not know this, but he did the stunt and or fight coordination for the following movies: The Gray Man, which just came out on Netflix, The Old Guard, Birds of Prey, Creed 2, Venom, Fate of the Furious, Thor Ragnarok, Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, and John Wick Chapter 2. So
solid resume.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'd have a tough time finding somebody who does this man's job with a better resume than that. That's very impressive. But I mean, we're going into this movie expecting to see good fight scenes, and if you're sitting here still listening to our spoiler-free section wondering if you should see it, and you're worried about the fight scenes, I hope this increases your confidence. They're great fight scenes in my opinion. Stellar, you know, especially knowing that, like you said, the actors and actresses perform 90% of their own stunts.
Yeah.
Just a really impressive feat.
Something that I really love in movies and shows, especially when the story is supposed to be very grounded, is when the fights and stuff are realistic. And something that they did in this movie, since they didn't use a bunch of stunt actors and stuff and stuntmen and women, they had to make it realistic for the actors to actually do these different moves. And it really showed this like realistic aspect and believable aspect of like, oh wow, these women could actually do that. Oh, it's because they're actually doing that, which I thought was really cool. And I loved how grounded this movie was while still being very exciting.
Yeah, the fighting styles of the individual characters fit
they're pushing
their individual
humans'
strengths.
capabilities for sure, but it's still in this like believable way. You know, they're not jumping 20 feet in the air, you know, but they're still doing incredible feats of strength and skill. Yeah,
I mean, Viola Davis's character, Naniska, looks strong and built. So we see her do more strength-based fighting moves rather than acrobatic style fighting moves, whereas it might be a little different in Nawe's case, who, you know, is smaller and seems more agile.
Which, that means if they didn't use, like, stunt women and stuff, like, she was, like, twirling the stick all on her own, and it looked like they had pretty complex scenes with that.
Yeah, I think some of the behind the scenes, they talk about the difficulties of using those, specific the spears and everything. They talk about how difficult it was being barefoot, you know, in the heat in Africa on different terrain, sand, and so they're doing all these things themselves.
That's something that I noticed while watching the movie was like, wow, these women are all barefoot basically the entire movie.
Which is like they say themselves, they're like, it's a small thing, but it's something you start to notice. I mean, is
like, when's the last time most people have gone outside and just walked around with no shoes?
Yeah, I mean, on gravel or, you know, concrete as opposed to like the beach is not that common.
No, exactly. And it's not that comfortable either. So my wife's family kind of grew up without wearing shoes, so they have like the world's strongest feet for people nowadays in America, right? And they walk across the street, and the street's like really rough gravel, and then they go into the grass, they climb trees without shoes, and then I try to keep up with them without shoes, and I can't. My feet are so soft.
Mine are, my feet are soft too, always wearing shoes.
To do these fight scenes and to have to run across this gravel and tough terrain in Africa, that's a subtle difficulty that these women had to go through for the roles of this movie.
Yeah, and they're all troopers, all of them. I mean, they're a tough group, but I can't believe that I've let it go this far without us mentioning the name of the director and cinematographer. I apologize for the disrespect, but let me get into it. The director for this movie is Gina Prince. I believe it's Bythewood. I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correct.
Looks right to me.
Gina Prince Bythewood. It's a hyphenated last name. And then she... I've looked through her works, and she is the director of The Old Guard and Love and Basketball, which I'm glad now that I know that she's director of the Old Guard, because she's directed 2 movies that I love. I've yet to see Love and Basketball, but The Old Guard I feel like almost has a nod to it in this movie, where they shoot the musket at Naniska and she blocks it with her machete. A very similar shot as in The Old Guard, where Charlize Theron's character blocks a bullet with her axe, I believe.
The way they did that was cool, too, because it almost looked like it was an accident, but on purpose.
Yeah,
you know, like someone held up the rifle and she kind of put her arm up, and it just like, it made it seem like it coincidentally hit, you know, at the right spot to attack her. It was cool.
I think it was almost part luck, and that has to be realistic, right, to block a bullet. So I think she threw the machete up just in a wild.
But she looked kind of surprised from
it. Maybe she was surprised it worked.
Yeah.
But it came off really epic the way, and the force of the bullet knocking the machete aside or the sword aside, and it
looked really cool.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite. Oh man, spoiler.
It's not that big of a spoiler. It doesn't spoil any of the movie.
We won't spoil the plot.
It spoils a cool shot.
Before we fully delve into spoilers, though, the last thing I wanted to say was a cinematographer, which is Polly Morgan, who she actually directed a movie I just saw in theaters, Where the Crawdads Sing, which I thought was a very good movie. Recently, they turned the novelization of this book into a movie, and I thought that movie was really well shot. It was done in a marsh, so just a lot of cool artistic shots of nature and the environment. I think that she captured the feel in that movie really well. She did cinematography also for A Quiet Place Part 2 and Legion, which is a television series, a Marvel television series. Mm-hmm. So notable resumes for most of the people involved in this movie. And I think that it really showed on screen. I mean, you can't knock a 99% critics or a 99% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. That's hard earned. And I think that all the people involved in this movie must be just basking in the response right now.
Yeah. So what is a good movie review without some negative points, especially coming from you, Andrew? We can't go through this review without you saying some of the things that you didn't like. So remember, we're in our spoiler-free portion. So what are some things that you didn't really like about this movie, or like maybe could have been a little better, but you can't spoil anything?
So I'm gonna touch on the cinematography actually a little bit, because
bad timing. We just praised
the
cinematographer.
Well, I can. You can praise somebody and critique them at the same time. It's like if you got a good grade on a paper, but with some critiques. Not that Polly Morgan would care about my critiques. She's very successful.
Who are you again?
She just keep doing what she's doing. She's doing better than me.
How many followers do you have?
Hey, we're doing a little bit better.
We are.
So I would say that at times the cinematography felt like there was some room for improvement, where I felt like I wasn't necessarily noticing a huge amount of artistic shots, or I wasn't noticing maybe angles or shot length, the period of the shot enhancing the movie. Because I did notice a couple really great shots, but I felt like they stood out to me as opposed to there being a greater number of these shots in the cinematography.
I feel like sometimes the role of the cinematographer is to not distract from the story. And at no point was I like, what were they thinking with that shot? Or, at no point did the cinematography take me out of the story.
Where the cinematography was definitely phenomenal to me? It was in the fight scenes. Because I think that's where you shouldn't notice the cinematography. Because if you notice the cinematography making it hard for you to watch the fight scene, it's ruining it.
Yeah,
and I think this movie, the fight scenes to me were crystal clear. I was not lost in kind of the dialogue of the fight. I followed.
They held a lot of the shots for a while, so
you
could, really see what happens before they cut to a different camera angle.
There's one shot that they hold on Nawe that we can talk to when we get to best shots. That I think enhances the movie and elevates the movie. But I think that when you're looking at a movie that I think deserves like an A+ rating, you got to nitpick to look for something to complain about. So what did you have as yours?
The main thing for me that was at some portions, mainly kind of in the middle of the movie, I was kind of thinking all right, what time is it? The pacing for me was a little bit slow, but I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing for the story or anything. I think it's just more so my problem and my attention span being really short, especially with how many notifications we're getting on our TikToks and stuff like that. I'm wanting to look at something else. I think a lot of people are nowadays,
Oh, we have a TikTok page?
Do we have a TikTok page? Oh my gosh, Andrew, we do. Backseat Directing on TikTok and Instagram with no spaces. We also have a YouTube channel, Backseat Directing, and we're on the podcast apps on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and everywhere else that you listen to your podcasts. If you've listened this far, please give us a review. Give us 5 stars. If you want to give us 1 star, we'll block you. No big deal.
Stick to liking, following, listening, subscribing, all that good stuff. We really appreciate everything.
We post new episodes every Monday and Thursday. Again, they go out on our YouTube page and podcast page, so be sure to check those out. Monday and Thursday.
And now we're going to head into that spoiler territory. So if you are planning to see this movie and you do not want to know anything about it going into it other than what we said so far, hit pause, watch the movie, make sure you come back and finish the episode later so that we can compare our thoughts. All right, so I want to talk about the general plot of the movie. We talked about the opening. We've got them, our Agojea warriors coming out in stellar fashion. They come out with an epic fight scene fighting these Oyo warriors, and they kind of take some prisoners back with them. And after that, we get introduced to Nawe for the first time. So Nawe is kind of like this character with a tragic backstory, like almost everyone in the movie, every one of our Agojea warriors. So Nawe is this really interesting character who gets just dropped off at the front of the palace because her father doesn't think that he can find a husband for her. And where
that scene was like kind of uncomfortable. Like, could you imagine being the parent of a child and you're like giving your child away to this much, much older man to be his wife, and he's like straight up just disrespecting her right in front of you, and like the mom and dad is just sitting there like, man, that made me mad.
Yeah, and I feel like that's part of where my love for Azogi starts, because I felt mad like you, and when she gets dropped off, Azogi comes to the door, and Azogi's just kind of slyly grinning at this whole situation. The idea that Nawe won't marry a man who beats her. That because Azogi, she's the kind of person that this is building her respect for Nawe, and she kind of takes her under her wing like immediately right away. And I could go on and on about all the things that make Azogi great, but let's get to some of our favorite scenes from there. So we've got an awesome training montage. I love a good training montage. I love it. It's the best part of any movie. And we get to see our hero kind of rise up and prove people wrong, prove the people that doubt her because she's small. Azogi kind of calls her like a little fly or a little flea, because Nawe is, she's small in stature, but she's big in heart,
Yeah.
What did you think about the training montage?
I thought it was cool. It was super cool how she like goes and swings and the sword gets stuck on the dummy, and then Viola Davis just knocks it right off. That was
show
cool.
Strength.
It was also cool in the training montage when they're first getting started. The first like weapon that they use is the rope, and she's like, "The rope isn't a weapon. Why am I doing this?" And then later on, she's got a rope attached to a knife, and she's flinging it around, and throwing it, and stabbing people with it, and bringing the knife back. It's like, full circle. That was cool.
There's also great symbolism in this movie with ropes and chains, which are two obvious symbols of oppression and binding people, two things that are heavily tied with themes of the movie like slavery and oppression, and we get to see them ironically turned around as weapons against the oppressors by Nawe using the rope as part of her weapon, and then eventually we see one of the Agojea warriors use a chain as a weapon to kill one of the white slavers. So it's really cool to get to see them kind of turn that on its head. And they also just make cool weapons, visually something swinging like that is just a cool tool in a stunt coordinator's belt.
Yeah. So Nawe goes back, and like when they're going through their final tests or whatever, Nawe goes back into these thorns to kind of save her friend and get her friend through the thorns so that way she can stay on the group. I was kind of hoping there was going to be some sort of consequence to that, but then she like still goes out there and wins. So to me, it made it seem like everyone else was way, way below her. If she was able to go back into these thorns, grab her friend, and then catch up, and not only catch up over that big, huge wall, and then climbed down. Fast, she jumped down, which that was cool.
Yeah.
But then she faces these two large guys, and she takes them down, and she beats everyone pretty by a lot, it seemed like, you know?
Yeah.
So I was hoping there was a little more consequence of her, like, kind of going back, and, like, maybe she didn't win, because she ended up winning that contest. Maybe she didn't win, but it showed more of her character, so she kind of earned respect in different ways, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that she could have lost, you know, in a way, just not come in first.
Yeah.
And then Gezo could have still given her the prize as a way of acknowledging what Naniska said earlier, which is that they are, you know, sisters. They're a group. They move together. They're strong as a team. They're weak as an individual. So her going back for her
like
friend,
her having
comrade,
like some conflict about that of like, why didn't you keep going, blah blah blah, and she's like really saying like, well, we're a team here, and my friend was struggling, you know. I wish there was a little bit more kind of consequence for her kind of going back, and then like maybe in the end battle or whatever, she's there like kicking butt and whatnot, and it's like, oh, she's still a great warrior, but she's there protecting her fellow warriors as well.
It would have been great if all of the trainees went back to try and get everyone through the trial together. A really good line does come out of it on the other end of the spectrum to me when Naniska says, Amenza is my friend. I would step on her head to win a foot race. Like I was like, that's great.
Yeah. And she's like, what?
Amenza just kind of turns back like,
hey.
Would you? Are you joking right now? But yeah, the whole training montage up to the trial where they actually become Agojeo warriors is phenomenal. I love stuff like that. So it was
I really love like tribal movies or even like team movies, like sporting movies and stuff, where they all kind of get excited and they get into this chant, you know, and they're kind of all dancing together in sync and stuff. That kind of thing like gets me pumped up.
And that happens a couple of times in this movie, and it got me really hyped up before their big battle when they were all doing that dance together and they get singing.
They get so into it, you know. They kind of lose themselves in the moment, and you could see the actors kind of losing themselves in the moment and like really displaying this excited but fierce face as they're kind of dancing through. And I was like, this is great.
But in the scene that I'm thinking about, even my eyes were locked in on Azogi just because I feel like Lashana Lynch brought so much like charisma and magnetism to the character. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like they talk about in like a performance, like on like in musical theater, your eyes go to one person on the stage, and generally they try to put that person at the front of the group if they have a group of dancers.
Yeah.
And she just has that like magnetism.
I feel like Amenza was very enthusiastic during those portions of the movie too.
Well, the four leads just are phenomenal. Like if we're going to get into discussing performances, I'll say even five leads, like all of them, Viola Davis, Thusu Mbedu, Lashana Lynch, Sheila Tim, and John Boyega. I thought they were all great performances.
Yeah. They were all great characters too. They all drove the story forward in some way. You know, like there wasn't any character that was just there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But they took great written characters too and elevated them. I mean, they really performed their hearts out in these roles, and I think they poured their hearts and souls into it because you feel the emotion that they're putting through. You are locked into their character and their lines. I think that they're all fleshed out individual people with their own personalities. Rarely do I say it. I feel like rarely do I ever say that about a cast of five. Like that's a big compliment I think to give for that many people to do that well of a job.
Yeah. Obviously, you like certain characters more than others, but no one seemed overshadowed.
I was never watching a scene without Azogi where I was like, when's Azogi going to come back? This movie's no good without her. You know, it was still, all of them were interesting to me. Conversations between just Amenza and Naniska, I immensely enjoyed as well. You know, I was never like a whole section of the movie where I was waiting to just get back to other characters.
Yeah. Did you see the twist coming that Norway was Naniska's daughter?
I think I only saw it coming when they wanted me to see it coming.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw it coming when they kind of started to touch on it in the plot.
Yeah.
So now that you're listening, because I assume you've seen the movie, we're talking about how Naniska had a baby because she was sexually assaulted and gave birth to that baby, and had a Mensa basically handle the issue for her, bring the baby somewhere. She dropped her off at their kind of time period's version of
But
an
don't
orphanage.
mean weren't supposed to have kids.
Yeah. So she would have had to she explained she would have had to give up on her sisterhood. She would have had to give up on the Agogea if she were to have this child and raise this child. She couldn't be a warrior anymore. She couldn't be a general, because that's just against their culture and their rules for that group. Mm-hmm. So she made a difficult decision, and it burdened her for the rest of her life. And this is kind of where the big character development is for Naniska, in that her line from the trailer of "to be a warrior, you must kill your tears" is something that she has lived her whole life by since that moment, and just closed herself off. And the only thing that she thinks in terms of is in terms of protecting her people, protecting Dahomey and Agogea and her king, and serving her king. And she doesn't really think emotionally, and she doesn't open herself up. And by the end of this movie, that shot they hold on Viola Davis where she cries, and creating that juxtaposition to her saying, "You must kill your tears," she sits alone and lets herself weep for all the time that she lost with her daughter, is like her character's kind of breakthrough moment, where she's allowing herself to feel again, and she's allowing herself to be her whole self. Because I think a part of the movie is for a woman to be strong and be herself, to be able to feel, to not close yourself off and still be strong and be able to be perceived as strong.
Yeah, I think that goes for men and women too, like
yeah, it
anyone in
ways.
like an authoritative position, like it's good to be tough, but it's good to show your emotions and talk about your emotions, and have a family of people that you are comfortable with and they can help you kind of deal with all these issues and emotional things that come up, so that was a cool aspect of it. So our show is called Backseat Directing, right? So we're directing, or we have opinions and stuff. So Andrew, if you're in the backseat of this movie, what are some directing cues that you would give? What are some of the things that you would reinforce and want to keep the way that they were already going? And what's something that maybe you would change?
So I'll start on the negative so I can end on the positive. I would change, I would not have killed Azogi. So Azogi, my favorite character, as I've said, dies kind of, I'd probably say at the beginning of the third act of the movie. And I don't feel like I'm okay with killing characters. I just don't feel like her death served the purpose of launching the story forward. I don't think it got any of the other main characters over some kind of major emotional hurdle. I was saying last night that maybe if her last words had been encouraging Nawe to, reconnect with her mother, because, Nawe is kind of left with, the pain that her mother's abandoned her at this point in the story. So if maybe her last words or her final act saved Nawe's life in some way, or launched Nawe into, some kind of epiphany, then I could see it being valuable. But she kind of died without that, even though the purpose her death served was being just gut-wrenching to the audience. Mm-hmm. Do you agree?
I agree with you that it didn't necessarily move the story forward, but it was kind of like that shock aspect of the movie. I wasn't expecting her to die at that point, so like in that moment you feel the emotions of it, but like you said, like it didn't necessarily push the story forward.
Yeah. I mean, without that death though, we wouldn't have got one of the best shots of the movie to me, one of the most emotional and heartfelt shots of the movie, of the close-up of Thusumberu Nawe as she's cradling Azogi in her arms and crying and screaming, and she's saying, stay away from her, don't touch her, and just holding her ragdoll body in her arms is, I really was feeling the pain and emotion in that moment, and just Nawe's tears and her screams and she has spit flying. It's just like guttural and visceral, and just seems like this real raw emotional performance. It's one of the strongest points of the movie is the performance. And earlier when I critiqued the cinematography, it's only because the action, the stunts, the acting, all the other aspects of this movie, the direction are so strongly on point that I might notice where I'm not feeling as much from the cinematography because everything else is so strong. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, one of the peak moments of the performances in that movie is that loss for Nawe. But let's touch on what you would keep and what you would change.
So the biggest thing that I would keep is having the actresses drive the action and perform their own stunts, and not force them to do stunts that they can't do to where it looks unnatural or pulls you out of the story, but creating choreography that matches the actresses and their capabilities. That's something that's just really cool to me. So I would keep that going. And then we've kind of already touched on this before. Something I would change is maybe like some of the pacing in the middle of the movie, kind of like right before and after the training montage, just kind of cutting some of the fat out a little bit and kind of having it move a little bit faster. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes long, but it almost felt longer than that at certain points. So probably taking out 10 to 15 minutes of that probably would have held my attention a little bit better.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, I'd say it probably did feel closer to like 240, 245, which, I mean, you don't want your movie to feel longer than it is. You want it to feel like you're so wrapped up in it that it's over already. Oh no. Yeah. So yeah, I could see that. I can't sit in the editing chair and say where I would trim anything off the movie.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I'm sure with all the footage they had, they still did obviously a phenomenal job editing. But like I said, we're nitpicking because it's a good movie.
Maybe in the middle of the movie, maybe there could have been more conflict that they would have to overcome other than just their training montage, right? It seemed like, oh no, this force is coming, we have to prepare, but there wasn't any like urgency of like having to prepare in a sense. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So maybe there was like some sort of small conflict or problem that they had to solve either within themselves or an outside force.
Yeah, maybe even if we had a second group or a detachment that we were following, mm-hmm. that was somehow out there in the field, maybe even just observing the approaching threat and getting an idea, could build up the size of the threat of the Oyo and the impending nature of it coming closer. Kind of, two things, pushing each other along in the plot.
Yeah, because like you said, it would be hard to go through this movie and take aspects out, but maybe adjusting some things, keeping it around the same runtime, maybe even adding a few minutes, but kind of adding something in the middle that shows urgency to the story.
Yeah. Well, with our backseat directing done, I have some of my favorite shots to mention, and I have some interpretations of events in the movie that I wanted to decipher with you.
All right, let's hear it.
I'll start with my interpretation. So I want to hear what you think about this. And this is just me putting on my my one cinema class hat. So at the end of the movie, we've got a relationship between Nawe and this man who is, from Brazil. He's part Dahomey and
jacked, by the way.
Yeah, that guy's huge.
A beautiful man.
Not as jacked as a Zogi, but
yeah.
No, but
Andrew leaned over to me in the theaters and was like, "This guy is jacked for no reason." And I said, "The reason's for the ladies." And then I leaned over again and I was like, "And for the guys."
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what LA Fitness this man's going to in 1800s Brazil, but hey, his results are hard to argue with.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know how he's so cut. I mean, his
genetics.
But anyway, so you got the romantic subplot, and he gives her this white outfit because she got blood on her other clothes in the slave market. So at the end of the movie, we see her put on this white outfit, all white, and I kind of interpret it as being akin to like a wedding dress. She's wearing all white, and I see it as symbolic of the life she would live if she embraced a romantic relationship with this man, if she wanted to be a wife and have a family instead of a warrior. And her putting it on is kind of her trying that on, seeing what it would fit like. But then immediately after putting it on, we see her slash, her sword across a member of the Oyo tribe and splatter blood across it. And that's symbolic of her denying that lifestyle and choosing the way of the warrior, so to speak. And she's going with her mother and her sisters and her tribe and her people. And she's kind of accepting that question she asked earlier, where she asked, how come we can't be warriors and have a family like the men can? And she's kind of choosing the warrior lifestyle by splattering blood across the nice white dress and denying that would have been. What do you think?
That's an interesting interpretation. And I think part of the reason of why she chose to stay with her tribe is everything that she's gone through with her tribe. Kind of like we were talking about the cast going through this difficult training for this role and then becoming most likely closer together because of all that hardship. Well, in this story, her and all of her warrior sisters have gone through all of this hardship together in this training and actual battle, that it'd be really hard to remove yourself from that, but at the same time, it would be hard to leave possibly the love of your life behind too. I'd probably choose love, but yeah. I'm also not a warrior, so
Nawe is way tougher than us.
For sure.
That much is obvious, but yeah, I think that I don't know if that's what they were intending, but I'm always trying to look for something like that, because I think there's a reason why they choose to put her in that different outfit when she could have just stayed in the first one. They wrote it that way, and they did set design and all that, in my opinion, for us to get something out of it. So I'm just trying to draw what it means to me from it.
Yeah.
But I found it very interesting. We already talked about Viola Davis, character development of going from killing her tears to accepting her tears. And then the one that I want to touch on as well is I think that the shot of King Gezo at the end holding Naniska's sword out at arm's length is a physical representation of showing his strength as a king, because they've already established the difficulty of doing so and the weight of the sword earlier in the movie when Nawe, as a novice warrior, couldn't hold it, and King Gezo easily holds it at shoulder height with a fully outstretched arm. So I think that kind of shows his strength at the end as a leader.
Yeah, there's two parts that we haven't mentioned yet that kind of tie into what we were talking about before, kind of going back to the training montage where she goes back into the thorns to save her friend. She also did the same thing, and I'm talking about Nawe, did the same thing for Naniska when they came bearing gifts to, what's the other tribe called?
The Oyo?
Yeah. So Oreo, when they came bearing gifts and they kick over the bucket.
And it's a bunch of heads.
Yeah. So they made it feel like, oh no, they were going to give away all of these warriors to this other tribe. But instead they were like, ha, just kidding. We're going to wreck you. But she stayed back because the man who sexually assaulted her was the head of that other tribe. So Naniska was ready to kill him. So she sent everyone else running back, and then Nawe saw that she stayed and went back after her, which was a cool, like, full circle moment from her training montage, bringing those same characteristics into the battle. Even though her general told her to leave, she stayed anyways and ultimately ended up saving her life, even though I think she kind of wanted to die fighting in that moment. But that was a cool aspect of the character development and the full circle of the training montage coming back to, like, that's where, like, if there was some sort of consequence before in the training montage, that maybe it would have been more powerful that she stayed back because she did the same thing even though there was consequences last time. But, like, because that's more important to her, she stayed back to protect her fellow warriors and sisters, in this case her actual mom.
Yeah, because Naniska is I'm sorry, because Nawe is hard-headed and strong-willed, and we see where she gets that from, despite her mother, Naniska, trying to close that off on her and tell her to follow orders. At the end of the movie, Naniska turns around and ironically does exactly what she's told Nawe not to do.
Right.
And she does not follow orders from her king. She leaves her tribe to go save her sisters.
Who got captured in that
arguably
moment.
her two favorite of the group, because it's Azogi and Nawe.
Right.
Right up there with her and Amenza.
Yeah,
her
but that was the second thing that I wanted to bring up is Naniska went to the king, was like, hey, we have to go save these girls, these warriors that you were just talking about. We have to go save them. They were captured. And the king's like, we can't. We just won. We're going to stay here. You can't leave.
Do not mistake my kindness for weakness.
Yeah. So she ends up leaving anyways. And she walks out of the kingdom's gates and starts running away from the kingdom, away from safety, away from her sisters. And moments later, all of the warriors are right behind her, disobeying the king's orders, showing their loyalty to their leader, Naniska. And in that moment, it's like, kind of gives me chills, just thinking of it as like, this is that sisterhood that they've all built.
Mm-hmm.
That, despite we're not supposed to be here, we're going anyways because it's what's right.
Yeah, that's an epic moment. That's like one of those moments where you get chills, just like when they're dancing before the battle or when they stand up out of the grass. This movie does a great job of playing on like that epic, strong feeling that kind of like buzzes up inside you. Because, it's like a great war movie should. I mean, the director, she said that she was inspired by Braveheart, a great movie, a great war battle movie, and you do kind of feel that in this movie. One other thing I was going to touch on, that's one of the best shots, what you just mentioned, I would say, when they're all running behind her. I'd say the three of them standing at the sunset after they've sacked the port with the slave trade is a great shot. I also really liked the shot of Nawe right after she finds out Naniska's her mother. She sits kind of in this little corner, and the camera pans back a little bit and goes wide, and you see like this small dark corner that she's sitting in, and the camera's from far away. It really captures the feeling at that moment that Nawe feels small and alone in the world, and that might be my favorite shot in the movie, just because I feel like it made me feel what Nawe was feeling in the moment.
So with that, overall, would you recommend this movie?
Overall, I absolutely recommend this movie.
So would I. I think this movie was great.
I think it's deserving of the high praise it's getting. My final thoughts on this movie that I want to touch on, just a few quick things. One is that they actually shot this movie in South Africa, which is incredible to see the movie shot on the continent where the story is taking place. The movie's, I believe, primarily being released for American audiences, but the authenticity just can't be replaced in terms of actually filming on scene in Africa. And I think they got some really beautiful shots because of that. Just the terrain and ground and the nature around them looks beautiful and authentic, and you really kind of feel immersed in the culture with some of the buildings and some of the sets that they have, which is also cool for the star, Desu Mbedu, to be able to film in her home province where they shot the first 2 weeks of filming, which is something she talks about on The View, which is where I learned that. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting to mention was I wanted to talk about some of the bad reviews I read on IMDb.
Let's hear it.
There's bound to be negative reviews on any movie, but 2 things I wanted to touch on that I saw as bad reviews were, one, that the romantic subplot felt unnecessary and forced and contrite, and you didn't really feel the emotion of it. And 2 was the point that the villain didn't feel fleshed out and we didn't see enough backstory for him. And my response to that is the fact that I think it's actually really cool that we have not only such a diverse cast in this movie, but we have a female-led story where it's truly female-led. I mean, throughout this whole movie, and I was waiting till the end of the podcast to bring this up, neither of us know, at least I believe, neither of us know the names of the male love interest or the male antagonist. I don't know either of their names.
Couldn't tell you.
And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think there's lots of movies where I don't remember the female character's name, maybe because they didn't make her a significant enough part of the story. But I can tell you Nawe's name, Amenza's name. I know Naniska. I know Zogi. Like, it's great to have that, to have movies where the female characters are great characters and they lead the movie and you know their names and you hear their stories. Maybe the male characters are a little forgettable, but maybe that's the point, you know?
Right.
The villain...
I don't think the love interest was unnecessary, though.
I don't think it was unnecessary, but I can agree that...
I think it helped drive the story.
It did drive the story.
She was talking about earlier, and we've already touched on that. Why can the men have families, but we can't? You know, and it kind of brought that all the way around, where she still ended up choosing.
He was also interesting because he was part Dahomey.
Right.
So there was like interesting kind of extra layers to his character, but cool still at the same time that the focus was so much on the women in this movie that he was just kind of like her side piece. Like he was a good person, you know?
I think all that was intentional.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And to me, the complaint I read of the review that said the villain, we didn't get a backstory on him. Every villain doesn't need a backstory. Personally, as a viewer, I'm kind of tired of the overly sympathetic, you know, forced sympathy on a villain. A villain can be a bad guy. He's just a bad guy. We didn't need to know about his childhood and what made his life so hard. We just hate him because he's villainous. And I feel like that's okay. And I think he did a good job as it. The actor did a good job.
We even got flashbacks of him, too, of being a bad guy.
Yeah.
You know,
we didn't need to know what motivated him to do that. We just need to know that he's bad. You know, Hans Gruber is a great movie villain, and I don't know anything about his childhood. Yeah. You know, I don't think that is completely necessary. And he, you know, was a solid villain throughout. You know, I think that these things did not make the movie any worse to me.
No, I agree with you.
I also, in one of those reviews, saw somebody write...
I hate reading reviews.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. But I saw somebody write, the fight scenes were bad and I couldn't...
Oh, come on.
I couldn't follow them and I couldn't even tell what was going on half the time. The shots weren't even showing the action in the shot. And
Get out of here.
I was like, this is unbelievable. Like, first of all, you understand...
They're just looking for
that the fight stunt coordinator for this movie did both of the biggest Avengers movies.
Yeah.
Like... You're gonna discuss the fight choreography and insult it. I felt so secure in my opinion that there was great fight scenes
for sure,
and I felt it even more solidified when I saw that who the stunt coordinator was.
Right.
I was like, you're ridiculous. Your review's invalidated now if you're gonna say the fight scenes weren't good.
Yeah. Can we contact IMDb and be like, hey, can we get this removed?
Can we get this taken down? Because this guy's just throwing. He didn't even watch the movie.
Jeez, people. I hate reading reviews.
Yeah, I mean. I don't know. They never want to be
as we're filming a podcast.
As we're reviewing. Hey, don't read the reviews. Listen and watch the reviews.
That's right. And then you can hear the motivation behind their opinions. What?
All right. So we could do a head-to-head battle.
Depends on what your head-to-head battle is. What do you got?
So a head-to-head battle would be, we can talk about taking our hero, the person I think is the strongest person in this movie, Naniska, and then in the spirit of our female-led action star series we're doing here, because we're following up our next episode on Monday is going to be Rogue One, we can discuss who we think could take Naniska in a fight out of a pool of female-led action heroes.
Let's do it.
All right, so I've got a list here of some notable female action heroes. And we have some contenders. So, to me, two of the biggest, toughest ones on here are going to be Sarah Connor from the Terminator franchise.
And people that we're having go head to head against her don't have superpowers.
Okay, yeah. We're not taking Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a fair fight. So human beings. So Sarah Connor from Terminator 2. I think we all remember her coming back into that movie as a badass.
Yeah.
She coming out of Terminator 1 and into 2. She comes back with a resurgence. She's trained, she's tough, and she's ready to fight the machines. And I think that she could give Naniska a run for her money. I mean, the majority of that movie, we see her using a shotgun. Mm-hmm. So that's also an unfair advantage. But I think if we see a fist fight, we've got two really tough female action heroes here who could really slug it out. Who are you putting up against Naniska first?
What about Salt?
Angelina Jolie and Salt. Now, yeah, Angelina Jolie could really make this list like 3 times because her role in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, another secret agent role for her, and then Lara Croft. I think all 3 of those characters are tough female action leads that would put up a heck of a fight.
What about the women in Wakanda? Any of them?
The Dora Milaje?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to...
That would be a close fight.
Yeah, I mean...
Whether it's weapons allowed or just hand-to-hand combat, that would be close. Okoye
is really tough. Really tough. And that makes me think, too, of Michonne from The Walking Dead. Because that's a sword fight. That's a sword-on-sword fight. That would be pretty epic to see.
So who wins?
I mean... it depends on what situation we're in, because you've got a really battle-hardened person in Naniska with a lot of kind of wisdom and strategy experience. So I think the one-on-one fight kind of diminishes her capabilities because she doesn't have her warrior force behind her.
Right, but I think both of them are kind of in the same situation where they rely on their clan, their crew.
Yeah, are you talking about with Okoye?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Okoye is... I
think she might win just based on her experience of what she's had to fight.
Yeah.
She's fought aliens.
Yeah. Okoye is also, I think, going to be faster.
Agile, yeah.
Yeah, she's incredibly fast.
Okay, so I think she might lose this one. But what about Rey?
Rey without powers?
Yeah.
Rey's going down.
She's getting wrecked.
I mean, I don't think she's got the upper body strength to take on Naniska.
No way.
Rey with the lightsaber, different story.
Yeah, for sure. Unfair advantage. Katniss Everdeen.
I think Katniss would probably lose.
I think so as well. Even if she does have her arrow and stuff.
We saw Naniska take a bullet and block it, so I don't think she's gonna have as much trouble with Katniss. Even though Katniss is deadly accurate, she's deadly with the bow and arrow.
Maybe we're underestimating the power of a bow, but
what do you think about Naniska versus Black Widow? Strength against speed, agility, and acrobatics.
Does Black Widow get her a little like tasers and stuff, or is
no weapons for either of them?
No weapons. I don't know. I feel like probably Natasha, just because she has more training in diversity of styles and stuff.
She does have the benefit of like 200 more years of fighting being developed into new styles.
Yeah, I think because like, let's say we were to take someone like you versus someone your size or even lighter, but who has trained in mixed martial arts. Like, who are we taking?
Definitely somebody a lot lighter could take me.
Yeah. So I feel like it's kind of the same thing. So Naniska has the brute strength, I think, and probably can take a hit better as well. But I think just the fighting experience and technical skill of Natasha, I think she would win. What about you? What do you think? It's a close one.
I don't know, because I don't know. I think Naniska could really take a lot more of Black Widow's punches than Black Widow could take of Naniska's punches.
I agree, but I still think that she's more technically sound to where with no weapons or anything, she'd find a way to win.
I think that's a fight that either of them could win on a different given day.
Yes.
Because they both have different strengths.
Yes. All right, now what about her versus one of us? Versus you.
Her versus me, she would definitely win.
I agree.
Here's the thing. If you give both of us a sword, and she has a sword, and we both come at her at the same time, we're definitely both going to lose.
So me and you versus her?
Yes.
Yeah, there's probably a high chance that we'd lose. I'd agree.
I think especially if she has a sword, there's no way. Yeah. I mean,
we don't know what we're doing with a sword.
If I tried to bare knuckle box Naniska, she's taking me down.
Yeah, we're too soft. I think maybe with training we would stand a chance, but then we'd have to train. Like we're talking about here and now. So, but if she wants to go head to head in a back squat, I got her. She's going down.
They got no plates in Dahomey. They got no metal plates.
Yeah, then I think we both lose. I think that's a fun way to wrap up this week's episode reviewing The Woman King. We appreciate everyone who listened to us review this movie. Thank you for staying till the end. We're on YouTube, all the podcast apps. We have a TikTok and Instagram. So go ahead and check out those channels. Give us a like, 5-star review. What else?
Yeah, if you haven't gone to see this movie and you decided to listen to the spoilers anyway, great. I recommend go ahead and seeing it. Get in the comments with us and tell us what you thought. We want to interact and communicate with everybody. Check us out on all those platforms, and we'll see you guys back here on Monday for Rogue One.
Remember, we post Monday and Thursday, so we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching, and that's a wrap.